Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our open house series. Again, my name is Robert Lane. I serve as the Director of Student Life here at South Puget Sound Community College. And today we're going to be talking about mental and physical health and some resources and some individuals on campus that are here to help guide you through this tumultuous time and get you to where you need to be. So without further ado, I'm going to do some quick introductions and then pass this meeting off to our professionals here in the room. So Rebecca, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Rebecca McLennan, and I am a faculty member here at the community college. I teach in natural sciences and in physical education, and so I'm just going to be sharing some tips and techniques for you to stay physically active during this period of quarantine, and then also provide you with some apps that are currently free for you to use in order to help facilitate your physical activity.
Awesome. Ross?
So I'm Ross Artwall. I'm one of the faculty counselors at SPSCC Counseling Services. And so Sally and I are gonna talk a little bit about our service that you're welcome and encouraged to use even during this time of quarantine. We're available online, and then some tips about how to manage your mental health during this kind of housebound time.
And Sally.
Yeah, and I'm Sally Sharbaugh. So Ross and I make up the counseling team here at the college. And so Ross and I are also faculty. And so you may this quarter see us in some of your classrooms because we'll sometimes come in and be guest instructors for classrooms around mental health topics. And yeah, I think our focus today is how to be taking care of yourself, your mental health, and maintaining emotional well-being at this time, and particularly around the idea of how to stay resilient and to sustain yourself, and how to tolerate living with uncertainty. Because in the midst of this quarantine, we know what's going on today, but we don't know. I think one of the challenges is that we don't know how long the quarantine is going to go on. And so how do you live with that uncertainty in a healthy way mentally?
Absolutely. So at this point, I'll let one of you, whoever wants to kind of take off first, and you can pass it to each other, and I'll just kind of sit back and facilitate the end of this, but I really want to turn it over to the experts in the room.
Thanks, Robert.
Thanks. Rebecca, do you wanna lead?
Yeah, sure, I will. Let me go ahead and I will share my screen here. I've just got a few slides here for you that I wanted to share. As we've been quarantining or sheltering in place for the past couple of weeks, you may have noticed that even if you aren't a regular exerciser, you probably were more active than you recognized, especially if you were coming to campus and searching for parking and walking into campus and back and forth from building to building. And notice that your activity level has probably decreased significantly. So I wanted to give you some ideas about how to be active during this shelter in place time. And so there are some great ways that you can maintain social distancing while still being active. And some of the great activities for outdoors are things like going for a walk or taking your dog for a walk, whether it's by yourself or with the people that you're currently sheltering with. Things like going for a jog. And if you live in a community where there are lots of people going outside and enjoying activities, you can even choose to go out earlier in the morning or later in the evening when it might not be as crowded, or going for a bike ride. There's also some really great indoor activities that can be done if you're in an apartment or a studio or just have a small space that you can work out in. Activities that are things like yoga, Pilates, some weightlifting. You can get creative if you don't have a set of weights. Certainly you can use things around your home like soup cans or your textbooks and things like that, anything that provides you with some resistance, and go through some basic activities. And I'll be providing you some free apps here shortly that can show you how to do these activities safely. And then things like jump rope or jumping jacks are also a great way to get some quick cardio activity into a day. There's a few quick tips that I have also just in terms of taking care of your physical health, in terms of taking short breaks during the day. So if you're working on schoolwork, as most of us are, making sure that you're taking a break at least every hour, if not more frequently, just to stand up and stretch and move around, get a drink of water, maybe take a step outside and get some fresh air, making sure that you're going for walks as frequently as you can, standing up, stretching. You can follow online apps, as I mentioned earlier, and making sure you're taking the time to relax. This is all new for all of us, and be kind to yourself and do the best that you can. You want to make sure that you're incorporating things like healthful eating and making sure you're getting plenty of fluids, particularly water. So why do I say all this for you? Why exercise at all? We'll hear from Sally and Ross here shortly why our mental health is so important, and physical activity is a great way to kind of support that mental well-being. And ideally, we should have about 150 minutes of moderate activity or 75 minutes of vigorous activity during the week. And now that we're sheltering in place, that can be a little bit of a challenge to achieve, but it's so incredibly important because of the physical benefits, but also for a wide variety of other reasons in terms of decreasing our risk for injury, maintaining or improving that mental health status. It can certainly help manage our levels of stress that we're currently experiencing, improving our mood and motivation, and decrease our risks of depression and feelings of sadness. So the good news is we have a lot of partners in this time of need, and I've provided here, this is just a list of some free apps that are out there right now currently that normally you would need to pay, in some cases, a substantial amount of money for, but they're being offered free from these companies. And I would encourage you to check them out. They're really great exercises and activities. There's some for children here at the end on that second list. The SOAR kit is specifically for littles. So if you've got littles at home that are also now out of school, it's a great program for the children to get some activities, some yogas and Pilates. That's child-based activity. And there's a wide range here too, all the way from very advanced physical activity for those of you that are used to regular vigorous activity, all the way to very some gentle movement. The MWH method is a very gentle introduction to physical activity. So check these out. Again, they're available for free currently. Some range from a 90-day trial to a 30-day. And again, I'm not sure how long they'll be offered for free, but certainly for the time being they are. I just want to encourage you to get up and move, and whatever that looks like for you is fantastic. And so I wish you all the best, and we will get through this together.
Great. Well, maybe I can bridge here by just mentioning a little bit about exercise and its ability to help you be resilient, even in the face of the kind of stressors we're facing right now. So there's some really a pretty reliable themes in the research around exercise and its effect on two things. One is your mood, you know, whether you're feeling down, low energy, low motivation, or whether you're feeling kind of in a normal mood range, you know, feeling kind of balanced mood wise, and anxiety, you know, that can manifest as worrying again and again, different from productive thinking, just worrying again and again, or just a lot of tension in your body, feeling a lot of muscle tension, difficulty sitting still and calming down. And what's interesting about the findings around exercise for the mind versus the body is that, boy, it doesn't take as much. It doesn't even require vigorous exercise. Most of the studies that show a positive effect, and by positive effect, I mean comparable to, in some cases, even superior to antidepressant medications for mood or for anxiety. And generally, they're having people walk with a purpose, you know, that level of exercise. So not just stopping every few minutes, but walking continuously with a purpose, not speed walking, just walking with a purpose for 30 minutes, 5 days a week. So 30 minutes, 5 days a week, walking with a purpose. Find a, you know, do that in the easiest way possible. You know, if that's in a, you know, a beautiful space, if that's with headphones on, listening to a podcast or music, if it's with a walking buddy, virtual walking buddy, and you know, getting on a phone call and then chatting with your headphones in while you're walking, whatever makes it easy. But doing that amount of movement, there's some really, really good reason to believe in well-designed studies that it will help kind of raise the floor on your mood and sort of lower the ceiling on your anxiety and help you stay kind of in that sweet spot that most students and the rest of us want to be, calm, but alert, awake, and focused.
Yeah, I'll, if it's okay with the two of you, I'll pick up on that a bit as well. I really like what you were reinforcing, Ross, that, you know, that for those of you out there who maybe haven't exercised in a very specific program, you know, that just walking and walking 30 minutes a day. And that totally lines up with what, Rebecca, you were saying of 150 minutes of moderate activity a week. So if it's 30 minutes of walking 5 times a day, you've got your 150 minutes right there. And one of the things that Ross and I've been talking a lot about recently too is the importance of getting outside at this time. That the quarantining for all of us and for students, it's that focus on being inside, and the terms like quarantining, sheltering in place. Those terms get used, and they're kind of from particularly the sheltering in place. It's out of, you know, having a crisis like a natural disaster, like sheltering in place during an earthquake or tornadoes coming through or something like that. But sheltering in place for these extended, you know, weeks at a time means like being at home and not being with large crowds, but you can still be outside. And just the importance of getting out of your physical dwelling, whether it's a house or an apartment, every day is really important, both for like taking a walk, but then also the benefits of being outside. The sunshine, getting sun on our skin helps us produce vitamin D, which is really important to mood. Sunlight is also getting into our eyes, helps us regulate our sleep cycle. And then also Ross and I have been looking into research that the essence of trees, these phytosigns that get exhaled by trees, has a direct impact on the immune system of the body. And there's lots of research out there on this concept of forest bathing. A lot of the research is out of Japan right now, where they're documenting these really interesting findings of spending a certain amount of time in a natural tree environment has an impact on the amount of fighter cells that the immune system produces. And they also have evidence that it lowers stress levels, and that they can measure a reduction in stress hormones from being outside. So those are just some additional reasons for exercise and being in a natural environment for at least 30 minutes a day. Even if it's gardening, you know, kicking a soccer ball around with your kid in the backyard, sitting on your porch, you know, but walking the dog, like you were saying, Rebecca, just it's just so important, not only for our immune system, but our mental health and well-being too.
And I have to say, Sally, when you first talked to me about the forest bathing, I thought, oh, this seems a little bit new agey. Yeah. I don't know if I buy it, but we can attach.
Ross was a little suspicious.
I was skeptical.
Yeah, he was appropriately skeptical when I brought up forest bathing.
But I have to say, since then, and totally independent from Sally, a source that I really trust, it's called MedCram. It's a ER physician that has some pretty strong credentials, did a whole series on, or a whole episode on the research around forest bathing. And it's pretty rigorous research, so we can attach the link to that video on the end of this video if people want to check it out.
Oh,
but I have to say, having seen that, I'm convinced. I'm glad to be going on a run today at lunch in the forest. Yeah. So Sally, one of the things that I've experienced, and I think a lot of people experience, like if we're out trying to kind of clear our heads, you know, be out walking or otherwise exercising, that sometimes if we have a lot of stress around us, you know, our minds don't cooperate that much. You know, we're out walking in maybe a beautiful area, but my head is, you know, worrying about how I'm going to stay focused this quarter, doing everything online. And I know that you lead mindfulness classes, which help people with issues like that. I don't know if there's any tips you would have for someone like me or a student that maybe is doing these things, but their mind is not cooperating. It's not coming with them on the walk. It's back worrying about something else.
About something else. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And as a reminder about our services, every Monday is Mindfulness Monday from noon to 1:30. Myself and two of the students from your campus activities board have a Zoom meeting where we talk exactly about this. And I'm actually teaching some strategies and exercises for mindfulness and doing that in a way where you can integrate it into your daily activity. Mindfulness doesn't mean that you have to go be stationary and sit on a cushion for an hour. You know, it can be these really great strategies that you can incorporate into what you're doing. And I really appreciate what you're saying, Ross, about you might be out like jogging and getting rid of some of your stress hormones by that physical activity, but in your brain you're worrying. And I think for students, you may be experiencing that too, like worrying about class, maybe worrying about work if you've been laid off from a job, or just feeling stressed and worried about how to be managing a home situation if everybody in your family is at home and in a really small space. And so I think the first strategy, a couple of things that you can do is, first of all, to just acknowledge and honor and recognize, wow, I'm worrying. I'm so distracted. I can't, I keep ruminating. I keep going back to this thought. And just to, first of all, just become aware of that. So just acknowledging it is a great place to start. Wow, my brain is not still right now. It's so cluttered. And then to perhaps have an image, if this is helpful, a couple of visual images that you can then bring forward when you're having those distracting and worrying thoughts that you want to be able to get a little space from, a little room, is to visualize those thoughts as clouds in a sky, and there's a clear blue sky, and there are clouds moving across that sky, and those clouds are your thoughts, and you can see them or observe them, but not get attached to them. You don't have to do anything with those clouds or even follow where they're going in the sky, but just to picture maybe a sky and there are a lot of clouds, or it's like a lot of billows clouds because your mind feels so cluttered, and just to picture just those clouds floating by, that our thoughts really are like clouds moving across the landscape, the backdrop of the blue sky. And the blue sky in our minds is just some quietness or some deeper just awareness. Another great visual is that the thought is a balloon, like a helium balloon that you've got a hold of, and you just open your hand to release, to, again, not being attached to that thought. And maybe these are things that you're thinking about, a problem that you're trying to solve. And like you were saying, Ross, productive thinking, that's useful. But maybe when you're out running, you just want to be enjoying the run and the landscape around you. And you can return to that, thinking about that problem you have to solve when you get back from your run. So when the thoughts intrude, you can just picture a helium balloon and be like, yep, that's there, but I'm going to address that later. So I think that those can be some visuals, the acknowledgement, those visualizations can help. And then the other really key strategy is returning to the physical sensations in the body. So redirecting one's attention from following, worrying, that ruminating, just redirecting your attention from that thought to the direct experience of the body and the sensations of the body. And one way that is really easily accessed is maybe when you're walking, or jogging, it's turning towards those sensations of the physical movement. If you're in a situation where maybe you're not being physically active, then you can, and so you're not having like an obvious physical sensation to focus on, then that could be the sensation of the breath in the body. And just, you can put a hand on your chest or a hand on your abdomen and just take breaths in and out. And just start to notice, what does that feel like? What does my breath and my body feel like? And how we most often experience that is the gentle rising and falling in the chest, the abdomen, maybe tickling sensation in the nose and the mouth. The breath gets used a lot as an anchor, simply because we always have our breath with us. It is the device, it's a low-level technology device that we've got all the time that we can turn towards.
More accessible than our cell phones.
Yes, more accessible than our cell phones, that we can just get grounded with that, the body sensations. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
that's great. Yeah, I mean, just because I think it's a little bit of a subtle point for a lot of folks, but what I hear, the main piece I hear in that is breathing a little bit of distance between the worrisome thoughts and you. And often, I know in my experience, it's hard for me to tell the difference. It seems like they're all one thing.
Yeah.
So I notice them as something that's happening to me, or I'm experiencing, like a cloud coming into my field of view and then going. Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting idea, I think.
Yeah, it's the realization that we are not our thoughts. We are ourselves in some deeper way, and our thoughts we have them.
Yeah.
And when we're so identified with them that they feel like that's me, like if I'm having worrying thoughts, I'm a worried person. It's like, no, you're having these thoughts right now and you're ruminating on something. And you can have a different relationship with those thoughts that gives a little bit of space. Then you become a little bit more of observing your own thinking habits rather than being your thinking habit.
Yeah, like that.
I'm curious, Rebecca, would you have anything to add to that, like with that intersection, around that and physical health or?
No, I think that you've explained it really well, and that's a lot of times, when you're practicing things like yoga and Pilates, that's a lot of the things that we talk about, just kind of observing the thought and not becoming attached to it, letting it go. And we always return to the breath in yoga and Pilates, and it's just kind of bringing a little bit of centeredness, just who you're being, and kind of experiencing the things that are happening within your body and just recognizing them, not becoming attached to them, and just letting them go. And a lot of times we will talk about doing a full body scan.
Mm-hmm.
Start at the top of your head. You just scan your body as if you were scanning a document on a copier, and check for the areas of tension. So are you experiencing tension in your eyes? So a good indicator that you've been sitting in front of the computer too long, or your electronic device too long and it's time for a break. Or maybe your neck and shoulders. And again, that's a good indicator that you've probably been hunched over, typing or reading. And kind of just go through all the way to your toes. And we don't judge those things. We just recognize and then get up and move and see if we can't maybe make ourselves feel a little bit better. But always just observing, not judging, and just kind of letting go. And so a lot of the things that you were talking about in terms of our feelings, we do the same things with our bodies, and just recognizing and being kind and doing what we can to mitigate those things. So yeah, there's lots of connection, and I don't think that you can care for your physical self without your mental self as well, and vice versa. So I think there's lots of connectedness, certainly.
I have a question to pose for the three of you, because I hear a lot of really great ideas, and I just kind of wonder, for the students that might be in a different headspace, in the sense of when we think of like Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? Like when we think about like, oh, like now all of a sudden I'm a mom full-time, I'm a teacher, I'm a worker, and I'm a student. When you say like, oh, a 30-minute power walk, like it sounds lovely, but if I don't have the cognitive ability to say I have 30 minutes to give every day, what would you suggest as some basics, right? So when we're kind of in that like fear and anxiety riddled kind of mentality, like what would you suggest as, I can set aside 30 seconds, I can set aside 5 minutes. What would you suggest to kind of get people to prime the idea of taking care of themselves? Because I think sometimes when you get yourself worked up into a state of anxiety or overwhelmed, it can feel a little daunting to say like, oh, like I'd love to walk through the forest and feel the forest, give me back my energy, but I don't have time for that, right? So I guess my question to you all is, what would you suggest as like the baby steps for people who might be working through some of those basic needs still, of making sure I have a roof over my head, making sure I have access to food, and taking care of myself might be those things. So what are those primers?
Well, maybe I could start. I mean, so I think it's important what you're saying, Robert, in terms of, I would think of it as role stress, all the different roles that you imagine this one student having. There's some research around role stress, and I think it's important to acknowledge it, that for humans, if you have three major life roles, I think named a student with four, but if you have three major life roles, like you're an employee and you're a student and you have a romantic partner, That's 3 major life roles. That's most people will feel very full with that. Like they really got to kind of keep their eye on the ball to keep all those themselves functioning well in all those roles, because it's a lot. It's a lot to manage. If you add a 4th, like you're describing, you have a child in addition to the first 3. Most humans start to develop stress-related symptoms. And I just want to, like excessive worry, like muscle tension, like difficulty concentrating. So I'd say that not to say it's hopeless, but just to acknowledge that if you have 4 major life roles, and it often is hard to not for students, it's real to be stressed with that, and to even be somewhat symptomatic with that. It's not your fault. It's just the nature of having role stress at that level. That said, one of the things I think about with role stress and may carve a little bit of time or energy out for some of the self-care we're talking about is I refer to it as systematic neglect. And usually when I say this, people think, oh, I'm supposed to be systematically neglecting something? It doesn't sound good. So I contrast it with neglecting role responsibilities. That's not systematic. It's not intentional. It's just kind of looking the other way, like the ostrich burying their head in the sand because you feel so overwhelmed. So I wouldn't recommend that. I'd recommend giving yourself permission earlier, especially if you have 4 major life roles, to make, and these decisions usually do not feel good. They feel bad, in fact. But to give yourself...
Oh, good.
There are people joining. Sorry, Ross, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Great. Welcome in.
So shall we welcome them or have Ross just continue going? And
yeah. So once AJ and Alejandro join, they're currently muted, so I'm going to unmute them. Hi, AJ.
Oh, and we have another person. That's
Hi,
great.
Alejandro.
But I want to make sure. I'm very curious about systematic neglect.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. So as soon as the crew gets here,
yeah. I
won't neglect systematic neglect.
Yeah, I'm eager because I think I could apply this in my own life. So
Absolutely. John, Alejandro, okay. Alejandro or AJ, are you here?
AJ might be.
It looks like AJ's still muted.
Oh. Well, let's see. I think sometimes it takes a little bit to...
Yeah, a second to...
Yeah, I'm trying to... Oh, there. I just got AJ unmuted.
Oh. Fun.
Okay. Well...
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ross.
No, that's okay. That's fine. Definitely want to welcome folks in. Well, maybe should I...
So continue
and see if
shall we
AJ
continue while Robert, you see if we can get our participants into the room?
Yeah, if they try to rejoin, we will. But AJ, if you're with us, we're just kind of walking through some of our tips and tricks from our mental health and physical health professionals here on campus. So Ross is with the Counseling Center and is just talking right now. So we'll join you in, and feel free to unmute yourself and introduce yourself if you can, and we'll keep going.
Yeah, so I was just talking about, we were talking about role stress, and if people have 4 major life roles, like they're a student, an employee, a romantic partner, and say a parent, then it's pretty predictable that you're going to have even some stress-related symptoms, worry, muscle tension, things like that. So, and this often doesn't feel great to students, but the idea of systematically neglecting aspects of one or a few different roles, I think is usually required, frankly. And I was differentiating that from neglecting. Neglecting is sort of like not being intentional, just burying your head in the sand. Sometimes once you feel so overwhelmed, it's like, I can't even look at my homework, and so I'm just going to let it go. That's not recommended. In fact, it's recommended much earlier than that to say, you know what, I have 4 major life roles, and I can't do these all with taking care of my mental well-being. So what can I do at 80% within one role versus 100%, or maybe even 60% or 50%? And this usually does not feel good to students who are really motivated and driven and want to excel and want to do right by all the people in their lives. But I would suggest this kind of hard decision making is required in order to best serve, all the roles that you're trying to serve within. So, for example, something like something like if your ideal is to spend every evening, with your romantic partner, that's many of our ideals, to come home and have some quality time every evening. And maybe the romantic partner wants that. It can be important to acknowledge and have conversations with them about that may not be possible. So let's go for quality over quantity, at least while the quarter's happening, So let's pick, maybe 3 nights a week where it's our night, or 2 nights a week, or 1 night a week. And I will protect that night. And I don't want it to feel personal to you, but I have to sacrifice the other nights, at least during the quarter. That might be an example. Doesn't feel good, but I think is necessary for health and really for your performance in the different roles.
Yeah. I would, I think those are some great examples, Ross, in that idea of like intentional neglect. And how I also take that in is just adjusting one's expectations. And that, so I think that can be, Robert, you were asking about like a baby step, for self-care and kind of stress management is just being able to say to yourself, I'm not going to do anything perfectly this quarter. It's just not going to happen. It's like to just, and that doesn't mean that you're going to slack off, but just give yourself some grace, some self-forgiveness, some room that you might, you're just not going to be performing at your optimum levels, maybe in many roles. That you're doing the best you can. We're all doing the best we can, and to offer that grace to other people in your family situation, if you're in your living circumstance. Because I can imagine how difficult it is for some students who, we were talking about the roles of maybe being a student, a worker, a parent, and maybe have a romantic partner too. But then along with that, you've also become a teacher and full-time caregiver to your kids, because there's no daycare, there's no school, they're home. So I think about the students that are in small living spaces and everybody's like on top of each other, and just how stressful that would be. And so that patience with oneself, with others, I think is really important. And then the other thing I would say, Robert, like a little starter for like self-care and like maybe even the mindfulness piece is, can you pick one activity during the day that you're just gonna focus on that activity and not have your mind, do the best you can to just practice attention on that activity, so that you get a 5-minute break from mental worrying and the body feelings of panic, because you're all the stuff you're trying to manage. So an example of that is you might decide every morning, I'm going to take 5 minutes to brush my teeth, floss, do some mouthwash, do my dental hygiene routine. And that's my 5 minutes of mindfulness today, that I'm going to close the bathroom door and the kids can't come in and my partner can't come in, and I'm just brushing my teeth. Like, if you can do that mindfully every day, that's a little 5-minute respite from mental worry that then contributes to the fight or flight response. Is that the kind of example you were looking for, Robert?
Yeah, hold on one second.
Oh, sure.
About a bag, gotta ask me.
AJ, did you have a question or comment? Or DB? Okay, I just have noticed that you've unmuted your mic a few times, and just wanted to make sure that there was something that you had a question about, that we could answer it. But yeah, that was an example that I was looking for. Just something, a micro step, you know, a step.
Yeah, and that something I mentioned earlier too is like around exercise is, like you acknowledged, Robert, we're not all in the position or have to, or feel like we'd have time to like take a 30-minute walk a day. So if you have kids at home, you know, can you help yourself get some exercise and help your kids get rid of some excess energy by knocking a soccer ball around in the backyard? You know, something like that too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing I would say, and Rebecca, you might, I guess, I think have some ideas about this, is the idea of incremental progress. You know, so often people have these kind of, and I do this too, like, okay, I want to make some change in my life. So then I think about where I want to be. And then I expect like the next day I'm going to like be there in some way, or be like halfway there. And that's just a recipe for feeling overwhelmed. I would encourage is incremental progress. And that's just not, you know, my opinion. That's the research on behavior change really supports incremental progress. And usually what I suggest is starting with something that in the direction of your goal, whether it's to take some time for mindfulness, or to be outside, or to exercise. Do something that almost feels like it's not even moving in that direction hardly at all. You know, something like, I'm just going to go out on my porch and I'm going to put my shoes on. I'm going to go out on my porch for no other reason than to take one breath, and then I'm going to come back and just do something like that. And that's your goal for the day. And the next day, you know, you might add a little bit to that. Ideally, these first steps should feel in the direction of where you want to go, but really not like you're doing much at all. That's the ideal. That's the ideal. I think of it as like creating a really easy on-ramp. Part of the reason why that can be helpful, and this is not how a lot of people think about motivation, but the research supports it, that motivation for these kind of changes generally comes from doing things in the service of the change. So making small incremental change. It's sort of like, I think about it like if you're wanting to start a campfire, you know, you don't just throw a huge log on and throw a match on it. That's not going to light. You have to make some, you know, put some paper down, maybe some wood shavings, some small kindling, and eventually you kind of nourish that fire up to the point where you can throw a full log on and it will, you know, burn really well. So thinking about that the same with human motivation for these kind of behaviors, you're not going to probably feel that motivated at first, but you can start with just little pieces of kindling, things that don't feel like the nice kind of campfire you want, but is a movement in that direction. And what that can do is to start to energize motivation. You might notice in a few days, you feel a little more energized to take the next step or take the next step. The key is to not expect the motivation first. To go out and take that breath on your porch, feeling completely unmotivated. You know, your mind is saying, there's no way I'm going to be able to do any of these suggestions. I got too much on my plate. I don't feel, I'm not an exercise, you know, all the things that would go through our mind, but go out anyway. And then the next day do something incremental, and the next day do something incremental, not just to exercise, but to invite motivation.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you want to continue to build on your successes. So if you have, you know, you're in school and you're working from home and you're a parent and you're all these things, and you have 2 minutes to yourself, then use those 2 minutes. And if that's all you're going to have for a while, then successful in those 2 minutes. And then as as more time becomes available, eventually, then you can continue to build from there. But there's nothing wrong with being successful in 2 minutes versus being successful in 20 minutes. And so I think, you know, people being cautious not to compare yourself to others, right? I think is one of the big take-home messages, because we're all living in different circumstances and we're all starting from different places. And so I think you absolutely nailed it. You know, starting with the tools that you have and the time that you have, and building on your successes, and being motivated by those small victories, I think is important for sure.
I'm really happy to be reminded and have you remind students, Rebecca, of being careful about self-judgment. You know, that we can be so hard on ourselves and those we're living with when we're confined and in quarantine. And so, you know, as frustrated as we might get with ourselves, as frustrated or angry as we get with other people, is just as best you can to catch that and just note, oh God, I'm really reacting right now. I need to take a breath, or I need to take 2 minutes, or I need to put myself in timeout from my kids and say to my kids, like, I'm, you know, gonna go take a walk around the house and I'll be back, you know, because yeah, it's just acknowledging we're in strange times right now. And maybe to, like, a little baby step, back to your baby steps, Robert, is to also remind ourselves and to remember that I'm not alone. I might at times, if I feel alone in this, to just remind myself I'm not alone. If you're a parent who's tearing their hair out because you're trying to study at school, and then you've got 3 kids at home, and you're suddenly thrust into a situation where you're supposed to be their teacher and managing their homework, and then you've just been laid off from your job, and so you're worried about money, and you might feel just overwhelmed with the weight of all of that, and the stress and worry, is that maybe to have some small measure of comfort to remind yourself, this is a shared experience. I might feel alone right now and overwhelmed, but I'm not. This is a human endeavor. We're all being impacted by this, and there are other students with parents that are parents that are struggling financially out there too. And part of how you're not alone too is because the college is here. It's one of the advantages, I think, of being a student right now, is then you've got this resource of the SPSCC campus community to help out, whether it's needing to talk about emotional stress, so being able to access Ross and I, to get ideas from Rebecca about how do I make meals that are going to be healthy for me. If it's reaching out to an ed planner, financial aid advisor for very practical basic needs help too. So just remembering your resources, and that you're not alone.
This might be a good time for me to screen share and just say a little bit about how to access the counseling service.
Oh yeah, great.
Want to do that? Okay, so bear with me here while I try this. Okay,
we're all learning together.
Yes. Okay, let me just see if I can make that bigger. Is everybody seeing that full slide? All right. I passed my Zoom quiz here.
You get an A.
I get an A. So a couple things. One is sometimes there's confusion about the counseling service, thinking about us like a guidance counselor in high school that does like kind of academic planning as well as personal counseling. Here, we have specialists in ed planning, your academic advisor. So that means we also have specialists in counseling, which is Sally and I. And we just focus on mental health counseling. sometimes referred to as therapy. Typically students come in for the reasons we're talking about. They're feeling keyed up and anxious, their mood is low, they're struggling with relationships and how to manage those. They're struggling to make a behavioral change and find and maintain motivation for that. All those are good reasons to talk with us. Both Sally and I are licensed to practice mental health counseling. It's a confidential service, so by law, we can't disclose to family or others on campus that you've even come in to see us. And it's free. There's no extra charge to meet with us. So to schedule, there's two ways. So we're meeting with everybody on Zoom, meeting with everybody remotely at this time. You can email counseling@spscc.edu and just let us know, hey, I'd like to schedule with Sally or Ross, and we will coordinate with you to get you in for a 50-minute appointment. Or you can just walk in. I put that in quotes because obviously this is digitally walking in, but we're available as usual, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Tuesday and 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Wednesday. And the Zoom meeting code for that walk-in is listed here, 974-0605-7374. The walk-in meetings are a little shorter, just 20 minutes. And there can be a wait if it's a busy walk-in, but generally it's not too long of a wait. Half hour would be usually pretty max in terms of that. And it gives us a time to quickly get started and then schedule from there if we need to. Sally, I don't know if you had anything else to say about, kind of helping students understand how to connect with us and the service.
No, I think you did a great job. The only other thing that I would add is that in the past, I've had students sometimes, like during walk-ins, they'll say, well, I don't know if my problem is big enough to see a counselor, so I don't know if I should be here. And what I always say to the student is if you're, whatever is going on, if you're feeling stress, if you just want a place to talk privately to somebody who's not your family member, not a friend, that we're here to listen in really an objective way and to help you understand yourself better. And so whatever is going on, please reach out to us either by requesting the appointment or using the walk-in hours, and we're here to help. And that our services are really student-centered and student-driven. So sometimes I'll have students that just want to meet with me 1 or 2 times, and they get what they need and they're feeling better, and then they go on their way. And then we have other students that maybe want to use our services more on a traditional kind of mental health therapy counseling of like once a week over the course of the quarter, and we can do that too. Our services are limited if you're doing appointments to like 8 to 10 appointments in the quarter, just because there's 2 of us and there's a lot of students, but often students are getting what they need within that amount of time. Maybe what we could do, Ross, is I could briefly share the screen of our webpage to make sure students know where our webpage is and how to get information off of our webpage too, because we've got good resources there.
Sure. Yeah. Let me turn that over to you.
So now I get to see if I can pass my.
Yes, I'm passing the baton.
my screen share. There we go. And folks can see that?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So I'm just going to back up. We can go to the main, this is the main SPSCC webpage when you come to SPSCC. If you go up to advising and support and then just hover over counseling services, that gets you to our webpage. And just briefly, the reason that I wanted to show this to all you students is that if you, forget how to access us, just come to our webpage and you'll have the information there. Our counseling email link is right there. And you can check out our hours because we'll be updating those slightly. And then if you scroll down the page, then we also have some additional resources. If you open that up, we have tips about coping with anxiety, a couple of different resources. These are articles. And then Active Minds. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Ross, about the Active Minds group that's going in a minute. But we also have videos, so you can open up this video and that will connect you to the playlist that we've got. We're trying to do little 5-minute videos every week, some little tip or strategy. And then you can read more about us. You can read more about Active Minds. We've got other resources here as well. So just to keep our webpage in mind as a resource you can access anytime.
Yeah, just very briefly, Active Minds is a student club. We're a local chapter of a big national organization by the same name. And this is student-led programming for SPSCC campus community with 2 goals. One is to raise awareness about mental illness and mental health, separate from mental illness, thinking about mental health is not just the absence of a diagnosable mental illness. There's also, positive mental health, just like with physical health. Not having a physical disease doesn't mean that you're necessarily optimizing your health. There's somewhere to go from there. So that they do programming around that. And the other is to destigmatize mental illness and help seeking, like coming for counseling or seeing a psychiatrist or something like that. So it's also a great way if you're feeling a little isolated. At this time, we're having meetings every Thursday from 3 to 4 to do planning, and then are looking for ways to do online programming. So if you have some ideas and want to connect with some really fun folks, it's a great way to do that. It's also a good way to build your resume, because if you lead a project, then you can actually put that on your resume as something as demonstrating leadership skills and all that goes with that. I will say, don't do this if you already have 4 major life roles.
Yes.
This is not a solution for 4 major life roles. It's an additional problem. But if you have some space in terms of roles, and you feel, maybe if you're feeling that your problem is not that, it's more feeling kind of isolated and wanting to kind of come into community with folks and do some fun stuff, then it's perfect medicine for that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if there's nothing else to share at the moment, what we can do and what I've done before is I basically just pause the recording. So I'll pause it. So thank you all so much for coming today. Again, this was our mental and physical health open house. Resources will be made available for anything that we did share today, and hopefully some links provided below. So if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to any of us, and tune in for the rest of our welcome weeks starting next Tuesday with our student leader mixer, and where you can meet other students and how they're coping and adjusting to this new endeavor that we're all going through. So thank you so much.